Hello, everyone. Thanks for this wonderful orchestral introduction. I did not know this nice new edit as well. Thanks to Lucas for bringing it in. Yeah, my name is Marcel. You are with me this evening, probably afternoon. I don't know exactly from where you are watching. And yeah, today it's once again about Aural ID. And I say once again because this time there is a new version of Aural ID, the version 2 we will talk about. And yeah, I'm really happy that you joined this session to, just, talk about something that is still very, very exciting for us because it's something new. Genelec did not do this complete approach before. And of course, I will mention our PRM set, so the personal reference monitoring, because this is of course connected to what Aural ID can do for you. And yeah, and hopefully a lot of you will then try out the trial because we have 2 weeks free use of the famous Kima head. And you will get all the basic information to run this demo. And I will also try to explain to you in detail how we generate our HRTF, what's the challenge with HRTFs, and how we implemented it with Aural ID. So yeah, let's just have a nice, I think approximately an hour, but you know me, so it also can be a little longer. And I can already mention, please, if you have questions, we are completely 100% live. So just grab the chance and just ask your questions using the comment section in the platform you are watching this on LinkedIn, for example, or on YouTube. Perfect. And now I will just change this wonderful, the once background to our actual presentation. And here we go. You should now see my colleague Patrick from Sweden, who is somehow our poster boy now about Aural ID. I just showed him that he is now his first front page of a magazine in Germany. Also, of course, an advertisement about UNIO and the PRM set. I already mentioned UNIO now a few times. Once again, I would like to explain to you what UNIO actually is, because UNIO is not a product, so it's not related to one product. It's more like an ecosystem, and our R&D director, Aki Makiverta, summed it up in a very, I think, precise way. So the aim of the UNIO ecosystem is to enable headphones to be used as a monitoring tool with a level of accuracy that loudspeakers have traditionally provided. So UNIO is about giving you a combination or a perfect, I would say, bridge between different ways of listening to mixes, to music, also about different ways of experiencing audio. And we involve headphones in that specific case. And of course, we are aware of that loudspeakers still, and this is not because we are manufacturing loudspeakers, still are the first choice if it's about giving you precise presentation of audio, especially if it's about, spatial things like rooms, like localizing, like externalization. But we tried our best to make it possible that headphones can be, a very good addition and also a good alternative in some situations for listening to audio. And not only stereo, but also immersive audio. The guy who's on this picture is talking to you right now. My name is Marcel. As I already mentioned, I'm sitting in Germany. Every, native speaker already knows just by listening to my accent, but hey, I got a nice compliment from the UK just a few weeks ago and she liked it. So I'm proud of it because I can't do anything about it. It's just with us, and until we don't stop dubbing movies, we'll just watch everything dubbed in German. So we'll never be as good as most of you, for example, the Nordics and also in a lot of other countries. Yeah, so let's start again with Patrick. Patrick has a nice studio. Patrick is sitting in our experience center in Sweden, which is just amazing. So if you ever have the chance to go to Stockholm, let us know and just give us a visit there. It's an older recording studio, as you can clearly see. And nowadays we just equipped all of the rooms and made this our own experience center. And yeah, Patrick somehow has the ideal situation of a 714 system. The 1234s in the wall are for stereo use in that case. So he can listen to music in an immersive sound field built by speakers. So with a very precise localization, because every channel has its own dedicated speaker. And yeah, that makes it somehow pretty easy that you can localize things, for example, from left surround, from side surrounds, from above. And yeah, if Patrick goes home, he usually also does not take the nice Avid console with him, so forget about this one. But he would like to have a similar experience, for example, to prepare mixes or to just listen to immersive Atmos mixes from Apple Music, but without all of these wonderful speakers, because as far as I know, even Patrick does not have this beautiful 714 at home. So he's using headphones. And what Aural ID is trying to do is just, a nice visual effect here. So to give you virtual loudspeakers. So the speakers you see here in green should give you a similar feeling compared to, for example, sitting in the real room and just switching these speakers to solo. Exactly the same should happen if you then switch the virtual speakers on your headphones to solo. And this is the challenge. With loudspeaker-based monitoring, one thing is really fascinating, and I think you agree. You can get an almost three-dimensional feeling. So already with I would say stereo, just coming from two speakers. And actually you hear a lot of things where you don't have any speakers. So for example, a singer is audible in the middle. So exactly the middle between the two speakers, although there is no speaker, you don't have a center speaker. And you can clearly hear, for example, the panorama of an orchestra. So who's sitting where, and also a field of depth. So, who's sitting closer to you, who's sitting further behind. And this is done by proper recording with, of course, microphones and stereo microphone techniques, and is then somehow transferred to speakers and then listened to you. And it works really, really well. Also, just because of our brain is really good at spotting differences between what comes to our right ear and to our left ear, and what's happening in between somehow. So, for example, time differences, level differences, and this so-called phantom center, so that a singer is just exactly in the middle of the speakers, is just created by having exactly the same signal from the left and from the right speaker. Ideally, if it's a calibrated speaker, for example, with the same frequency response, and of course the same time of flight, so the speakers should also have the same distance to you. And if this is the case, then you get a really proper presentation of a so-called phantom center. It's also what a lot of sound engineers always check if they listen to stereo speakers. They ask, is there a mono option? And then they listen to mono material to find out if the stereo imaging, for example, is blurred or if it's really precise in the middle. If we have headphones, things are a little different. Still, headphones somehow are similar to speakers, but problem is the speakers are now directly on our ears. So also directly on our ear canals, or if it's an in-ear headphone, it's in our ears, which makes it even more complicated. And I think all of you know, we got used to it. Of course, we listened to traditional stereo material on headphones. Yeah, for me, I have to say for ages, for decades. So we got used to it, that it's a little different. But if we really think about it, we have more or less the impression of that everything happens within our head. So the singer we spoke about is not really standing in front of us. It's somehow in our head. And this can be a really cool effect for some music. If it's a really intimate song, for example, this can just be really cool. With other music, sometimes it would be a little better to just, have this correct representation, that it's not in your head, but happening in front of you. Also depends on the singer. Some singers you don't want to have in your head, for example. Others, it's okay. So we have a fundamental different approach to the way we hear and localize instruments and signals and audio in general compared between speakers and headphones. What we try to do, first of all, is give you a really neutral headphone with our 8550, which is one of the main elements of the personal reference monitoring system, because you will later on realize if the headphones are not neutral or are not giving you a proper representation of audio, then it's pretty hard to work with a binauralized audio, because you will realize we somehow try to trick our brain. So we just want to tell our brain that something is somewhere, although it's not. And because the brain is pretty clever, it realizes, for example, if there's a coloration from the headphone, that some things are not right. And then you will also hear that. So this is the approach we had, give you a really good calibrated headphone. I will mention this later on, because every 8550 is calibrated in the factory, and you load this calibration curve into the 9320, and 9320 is the second element you see here. This is our reference controller for GLM, for calibrating speakers, but also, of course, for switching groups, for doing all the basic monitor controller functions. And it's also an interface, so you can easily, for example, stream audio from your computer via ISABU in the digital domain, or also analog, and you can use it as a converter. So a very versatile thing. The only thing it cannot do is record. So you cannot connect a microphone to it and record it. You will have to, use a standard audio interface in that case. If we talk about Aural ID, one fantastic term has to be mentioned, and this is the HRTF. Everyone who is already a little familiar with binauralized audio knows this. This means head-related transfer function. And just to sum it up, I think in an easy-to-understand way, it's a function that describes how your ears look like, your ear canals look like, your head looks like, and your upper torso looks like. Because all of these parts influence how you hear and how you especially hear sound from different locations. This is the main fact. I will keep this very simple. If you're interested into an in-depth thing, for example, you can travel to, I think it's Hanover in September, where Aki Makivirta will give a really nice lecture about it in detail. And I'm just, giving you the basics. But what's, I think, pretty easy to understand is we have differences, as said, between the two ears, depending on the location and the direction the sound comes from. And in this image, we look at the level differences or magnitude effects. So I will now speak about the speakers on the right side. So it's coming from the right. It's hitting his left ear first. And I think it's clear that, for example, this speaker, so the direction on his left side, is louder on the left ear. So direct sound is louder compared to the so-called diffracted sound on the other ear, because depending on the frequencies, as you know, frequencies have different wavelengths, and the higher the frequency, the shorter the wavelengths. And let's say we are in a region of 2, 3, 4 kilohertz. This is only a few centimeters. So for example, 1 kilohertz is around 31 centimeters. And then the head has a dimension that is getting similar, to the wavelengths. And of course, this means that there is some kind of a shadow on the right ear compared to the left ear. And what you also can see here that we not only have the direct sound path, we also have usually other sound paths, for example, hitting our arm, the shoulder, and then the sound gets diffracted because you just have a different path, which again also can have, of course, then issues with timing and phasing. So these are the so-called magnitude effects. And the second thing looks absolutely similar, but now it's about time effects. And when I spoke about, that the left ear got a louder sound, this time it gets the sound a little earlier because it just needs, some time to travel around the head. And so the right ear will have a slightly delayed representation of that. And the diffracted sound, as said, now has a time of flight difference. And it's only these two effects, but they have a huge impact on how good we can then really somehow capture this in an HRTF. Because in reality, we all know it works so well. So we don't have any coloration. For example, if someone starts talking and then he's just passing you by, the sound of the voice is not really changing. Of course, we lose heights, but there are no strange artifacts. Everything is just correct for us. Yeah? And this is just because our brain is trained to exactly our ears, our head, and our upper torso. And this works extremely well. And if you try to capture this, you get really, I would say, strange-looking curves, somehow frightening curves. Because just look at the left one now with this blue graph. This just shows, for example, how different the high frequencies somehow are, somehow get into your brain if you just calculate it, what's happening. And there's a huge difference, for example, between now the left ear and the right ear. And you see the right ear is somehow just getting more quiet, because as I explained to you, we have 10 by 3, so this is 1,000, so it's 1 kilohertz, and up to 10,000, so 10 kilohertz. And you see in that range, it's just getting, it's just reduced by almost, I would say, if you see, we start here, 15 dBs, 20 dBs almost. And on the left ear, where the sound actually hits, with the full impact, we have a clear difference then for the frequencies. And this is somehow shaped by the shape of our ear canal. Because as you can imagine, if the frequency is, lower and we have a longer wavelength, these small details in the ear do not really matter. So if you're listening to bass, it's just, pressure difference. And of course, it's really does not have an influence. But if we get into the high frequencies, then the influence is very high. And it's also completely different between people. And on the right side, you can just see, the time, so the group delay difference between left and right. And this is just to confuse you. No, this is just then a selection, how it looks like now from different angles. And this is really nice to see, because as you can see, for example, we have this 0 degree, which is usually front. Left, right, very similar here. And then, of course, if it's going to the side, it differs depending on the side. Once we have this orange curve just going down, and then we have the blue curve going down. And then we have other things that are even more crazy. For example, the 2-5 setting here, and you can see there's a huge difference then between left and right. And if you want to have a proper HRTF, you somehow need a lot of these wonderful diagrams, because we want, of course, to give you a high resolution of different directions. So, for example, with Aural ID, we have around 800 that are calculated. And this is the basis of everything. And audio has to be processed with exactly this information, that our brain starts to think, okay, this is not coming from a headphone sitting on my ears. This is coming from, I would say, for example, rear surround channels. Just for information, this is the so-called magnitude common factor. Sometimes this is mentioned. And this is an average magnitude across all directions. And this is usually also what you can see in the frequency response of headphones, because some people always think a headphone should look linear, like a speaker. But this is not the case, because a headphone is always exactly on our ears, and therefore it has to be slightly different from the frequency response. And we have, or not only we, but a lot of people have these nice machines to measure headphones. And as you can see, it's just like a target. And in the middle of everything is an ear, or a plastic ear. And then the headphones are put onto this machine. And you can measure what's coming out of the headphones through these plastic ears and also through, virtual, or in this case, plastic ear canals. Then you can see this looks similar to the common factor, what you see on the right side. And what's somehow also a little shocking is if you now have one pair of headphones, so this is really one headphone, and all of these wonderful lines that look a little bit like from the hippie times are from different test stands or ear simulators. And you see, it's absolutely different somehow. We see a few things, as you can see, up to a certain frequency range, for example, 6K here, it's very similar. And then with really the high frequencies, it starts to somehow be just different. And this is also something that you should always have on your mind. For example, also if you load, curves for headphones. A lot of softwares offer you, for example, the frequency response curve of a specific model. And then just listen carefully yourself. Sometimes, for example, for me, it's the case then that things get really colored. And that I also have the impression that it sounded more balanced and natural, although probably, it was not completely linear before. So always be a little careful about this. Because if we do stuff with, 5 to 10 dBs amplitudes, or sometimes notches, in the range of 6, 7, 8, 9 kilohertz, this truly affects how we, feel the sound. Time to drink. How can you do an HRTF? In the past, this usually was done like this. So you have to place a small microphone into each ear, and then you should go into an anechoic chamber. Very special stuff, very expensive to build, where reflections are almost completely reduced. So you have these huge pillars, and they just make sure, that you don't get reflections like in a regular room. Because you can imagine if you would have reflections, it would not be possible for us to capture really, just your specific HRTF. It would then be blurred by reflections from the room. And then you have to sit still for a long time. It's like at the dentist somehow. And you don't have to open your mouth. That's the only good thing. And then you have usually an array of speakers. And as you can see on the right side, these speakers are, of course, just placed at different positions. And then every speaker will play back a sweep one by one. And then the angle of the, of this arc changes. And then once again, and then again, and then again, until you almost have, a globe captured. And this is a fantastic process, I can tell you, because you will never, ever hear sweeps again after that. It will just be a nightmare. You will wake up dreaming of sweeps. But this is how it was done. And of course, it's a very good option, and you get very good results. This is no doubt about it. We just thought that it would be easier if you, for example, don't have to listen to that many sweeps, and also not everyone, has an anechoic chamber around his home where he can just go to, and therefore we invented an app. This application is already a little older, and the basic functionality did not change. So this app will ask you to shoot a video. So someone will have to assist you walking around you and then approaching your ear, both of your ears, changing the angle so that we get a really high-res video of the ears. And of course, also because you walk around you, of all of the rest. So your head, your upper torso, and yeah. And then we have 2 photos, and you should place a ruler close to it. This is just to have, the dimension so that you can do the scaling. Because a video, does not have a reference in it, first of all. But if we have this scaling thing with the ruler, then it's very easy to just, know exactly how huge your ears are. And and as said, we can then do a model, and this can help us to render about 800 directions. And a model looks like this. So for example, This is one of the, original inventors of Aural ID. And I'm lucky enough to know him, so it looks indeed very, very similar. And as you can see on the left side, this is just the rotating upper torso. This is the area we are capturing. And on the right side, you see we have, of course, even higher resolution than for the ear. And this makes it possible to render all of these directions. And what we can offer you as a demo, because you already know that, what is expensive is the generation is the production of your own personal HRTF. So we cannot give you this for free, but we have Mr. Kima, so the famous Kima head, just as part of our free trial. And this is somehow a really funny approach, because already in 1972, this was one of the first head and torso simulators. This is how it's called. And it's median, in every relation. So the ears, the head size, the nose size, everything, the ear canal, everything should be a median. Problem is, none of us is really median. So we are all different. We are all individual. And therefore, I think this schema head gives you a good first impression. So you can easily, I think, find out that externalization is working, and ideally also, for example, things like the 5-1 layer. So if you go to the surround right, surround left, usually this should already work pretty well. A seeding layer is a little more challenging. For some people, it works just out of the box with the Kima, and for others, there is then a difference between their really personalized or personal HRTF and these standard HRTFs. And most other manufacturers, for example, at the moment, usually use standard HRTFs, or you can shoot a photo and then you get a best match somehow. So they have a collection or library of HRTFs, and they will just then choose the one that suits you best. This is, of course, better than only having a standard HRTF, but the main difference with Aural ID is that we use something that is really only personally made for you. So it's really your own model. Yes, and in combination then with the PRM, I already mentioned that, you can have a really good representation of audio through headphones, because the headphones itself are just linear, and it's a very good headphones output amplifier. So you also have enough power for good dynamics, and you can equalize the sound within the 9320, in addition to the equalizer in Aural ID. I'll show this to you later on, but this is also just a nice option sometimes, that you can just tweak the sound a little, also then, of course, for other headphones as well. So you don't have to connect the 8550 to our 9320, but of course it's the perfect match, because then you can use the calibration curve we have somehow selected for you in the factory by just measuring your specific 8550, and then you can just enter the serial and the 9320 will do the rest. Yeah, just mentioned that. So now let's start with having a look at Aural ID version 2. Because a few things changed. First of all, what's pretty obvious, it took us a long time. So I think some of you had been with us on this journey and always asked for, so stay tuned, but until when? So this is just a huge thing and still a challenge. So I'm absolutely open with you that if there are just few things you can find out that should be tweaked and that could be optimized, just let us know. Because we are doing the same with our internal beta testing. But I think it's just great now to finally have this version up and running. And in general, I think the most interesting part is that for me it sounds definitely better way better than the old Aural ID 1. This is just because we introduced a new profile called immersive. I will talk about that later on. And I think this is even, right from the start, this is a really cool achievement, that the overall sound is more natural, and for most people also just feels better. It's Mac only at the moment. This is just because of we included a nice set of virtual sound cards called Aural ID Bridge. There are just different configurations, for example, 16 channels and a 2-channel, and this makes it very easy to route audio. I can also show it then to you, because you might know that Aural ID 1 was only plugin based. So you needed a DAW, and then you had to place it in one of the plugin slots. And this was a little critical. For example, let's say you are using the Dolby Atmos renderer and want to use that at the end of the chain. It was just not possible like this. And for example, you have Apple Music would like to listen to Atmos mixes through Aural ID. Was not possible. Of course, you could have done complex stuff to routing it into a DAW and stuff like that, but I think this is not really convenient. And therefore, we just now have a standalone application that you can just use as an input and output using these virtual sound cards. And what's also new, this is something I think especially people who are more into classical music, or let's say music that just has bass and low frequencies that are not monophonic. In a lot of pop music and rock music, usually, bass is pretty monophonic. So it's just a mono signal, and there is not that much happening with a spatial, thing. But let's say you have a good orchestra recording, or you listen to the wonderful stuff Morten Lindberg is doing from churches, it can make a clear difference if you can somehow localize low bass and low frequencies, also in an immersive sound field, in a better way, in a more precise way. And you can absolutely adapt this so-called low frequency envelopment option. I'll also talk about that soon. What's also new is that Marcel is now an Italian guy using the really nice new head tracking option, because this is also some people just asked for that, and of course makes perfect sense. And we decided to just use the webcam. So any webcam you have on your computer can be used. The moment you turn the head tracker on, you will get this nice face with, it's not a blue eye, but a green and a red eye, and your white mouth, and it will just detect, the way you are turning your head. It also, of course, detects if you just look up and down. And so you don't have to attach anything in addition to your headphones. You can use that. So we have this plugin option, but usually, this webcam tool works pretty well. And of course, once again, also you can use any headphone. This is not limited to, for example, 8550, because as said, the webcam is doing that. So how can you get your own impression of Aural ID? You will have to make my Genelec account. Some of you might already have that. Others just go for it. It's safe. It's absolutely free of charge, and you don't get emails if you don't like to. So it's very easy to just configure it exactly like you want to have it. So just create your own account, and if you then log in, you can visit our nice shop. I know shop sounds like spending money, but there's also this free trial you can see here. And the only thing you have to do is just click on activate. And then it starts immediately. So then you have 14 days of just, checking Aural ID with the Kima head profile. And if you did that, you can then go to the Aural ID section. So before that, there will be nothing displayed or nothing special. And the moment you activate your free trial, you can then download the Aural ID install package, which just includes also the drivers, so the virtual sound card drivers. We just recently found out that on some computers there had been an issue with, so it installed perfectly, but then the drivers had not been visible. And we found out that one restart usually, helps. But I'm very similar, usually I also have my MacBook, and when do I restart it? Yeah, sometimes it's just, for days that it's just, running and in sleep mode. So this good old thing, from PCs, reset and restart can help that the drivers are then visible. And you see there is also the option then to download the head tracker. We have two options. One is for Macs with Intel processor, and then one for the newer M-series Silicon Macs. And you also find, if you just would have scrolled a little upwards, then you can find the Aural ID Quick Setup Guide, which also explains everything in detail. There's also a short tutorial video narrated by me. You don't see me there. And it's only 5 minutes. So some people are sometimes afraid if I do walkthroughs or tutorials, because usually it's half of an hour. But this time it's only 5 minutes. So I think this is acceptable. And and then in addition, of course, if you would then later on like to do your own personal HRTF, you would need the so-called Aural ID Creator App. And this can be found just in the App Store. So just go there, download it. And then once again, you can log in with your Genelec account. This is also why you need it for, because these two things talk to each other. So this app knows, did you already, or have you already bought, have you already bought a license, and then you are allowed to shoot the video. So you will just have to log in. And as you see, first of all, there is no license. And then you have different options, and you can just go to Open My Genelec to then start placing an order. And then, of course, start recording your material. And as already said, this is an almost invisible ruler, but if you look closely, there is a transparent ruler. This is how the photos can look like. You, of course, also, you don't have to make sure you start, for example, at 7, 8, 9, 10 centimeters. It's just somewhere. This is then no problem. And there is a nice introduction by Purang and Darren, just showing you how you should walk around, the person you want to capture. And the app itself also shows it to you very clearly. We don't get an Oscar for the animation, I would say. It's not Pixar level, but it's absolutely easy to understand. And once again, this time in blue, this is what somehow then ends up at our side. So what happens on our servers. And usually it takes us 2-3 days at the moment. It can be slightly longer, but usually it's pretty fast. And then you just get a notification email that your HRTF is ready, and then you can just load it into your Aural ID application. Yeah, and this is how this application looks like. Please just ignore the beta 2nd of May. The screenshots had just been made, and they just are valid. This at the moment we have I think it's 2 null, exactly 2.0.1 is the actual version. And this is how it looks like in the beginning. Not very exciting. Some people ask themselves, "Wow, now I have mono. I can render mono." Thanks a lot. We'll change that soon. So when we first open it, I would first somehow configure the Aural ID bridge, so the routing of the audio. So you click here on the Aural ID bridge. And then on the left side, you can see there is Aural ID input. It's here. And usually, for example, for 714, I would choose 16. Just because 12 is lower than 16, so it matches perfectly. And then also select the inputs you want to use. You can also see in this window, if this is needed later on, you can change the sample rate, and you can also play around with the samples. So I think 512 samples is usually a good starting point. Just if you realize, for example, that you're getting crackles, from example, when you have an audio interface and it's just, buffer size is too low, then you could check the setting here and just change it. And of course, we also need an output. In our case, I have chosen the 9320. Also make sure that you select the outputs you want to use. With 9320, it's pretty obvious. With other devices, with multi-channel, it can make sense, for example, then to select, I don't know, 7 and 8. And what's also possible, if you have a speaker system as well, then you can use a loudspeaker output. So you can just select, a dedicated output, for example, another interface that then runs the multi-channel audio to this interface. Could also be, for example, done the virtual sound card, something like that. If I would like to use Aural ID for regular system audio, for example, from Apple Music, then of course go to Sound under System Settings and select the same bridge we already have configured in the Aural ID application. So in this case, it would also be Aural ID Bridge 16. And you can, of course, also use this in any DAW, or for example, this is the Dolby Atmos renderer, where you can then just select the Aural ID Bridge 16 as well as the output device. And this is the cool thing, this was completely different in the past, or almost impossible. Because of this virtual sound cards, you can just route everything in a flexible way, and you don't get any issues with that. Then this is also for all of you who want to use something like Apple Music, so somehow a consumer streaming player. You should go to Audio MIDI Setup. And in the Audio MIDI Setup, you can find, once again, the Aural ID Bridge 16. And if you now click on Output here, this is on the right side, and then you can use Configure Speakers, then you will see this nice option. And here you can configure your basic configuration. For example, I would like to listen to a virtual 714, and this is why I have chosen 714 here. And then you will see, then you will just have to make sure that the channels are just, going 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 up to 12. So this is just that the correct channel is chosen. And with the basic configuration we are using, this is just from 1 to 12 for 714. And this somehow makes it possible that Apple Music realizes, okay, we have a device that can do Atmos. Because if it's something that only can do stereo, it's just not possible to play back the Atmos content, or just play back the Atmos stream in a way that you can listen to it in a proper way. Because I've chosen 714, I think this is always a good way to start. I can now, to finally change this, really sad-looking mono thing to something more fancy, I can just go for routing, monitor layout, and then I can go for 714. And now it looks like something that is fun to listen to. And and you see, at the moment, we did not check how the channels come into Aural ID. So this is then possible by routing and then channel assignment. And this is now really easy. You can just check from left, right, center up to all of the ceiling channels. If you mute it, or if you put it to solo, this is even better. If you put it to solo in your source, does it really, is happening here at the right position? Because you see there are small, somehow there's a metering, and this metering, of course, just indicates if you get an input there. At the moment, for example, LFE, dedicated LFE channel is not playing, so there's nothing visible here. And then if you like to, you can, of course, change the routing in your DAW. Of course, you can also just change it here. So if you just, place these green boxes somewhere else, then you will just have a new routing, and makes it easier. At the moment, it still says no Aural ID loaded. This, of course, is not really cool because this means that there is no HRTF used. So if you would listen to it at the moment, there's just no binauralized audio happening. And therefore, you can go to import from Genelec. And this is now important, even if you only use the free trial, so the key head, you still have to open it from your Genelec account. So just go there and then log in to your account, and then you will get a listing like this. For me, it's a little strange because I have one transfer profile. This was from somewhere else. And if you use the free version, the trial, you would see the key heads here. And then just load it. This will take, I don't know, 30 seconds, depending on the speed of your machine. And then you can see it's then just visible here as key heads. And you could switch it on and off if you like to. All of these switches, it's very easy. If it's red, it's off. If it's green, it's on. And now I've spoken about that we have new modes in Aural ID, so new modes for the HRTF processing. And you can change them here on the profile, and it's neutral, immersive, and raw. And immersive is the pre-selected one because we think, or a lot of people think, it works best out of the box, but this is completely individual. So please check out neutral, for example, as well. And just to give you a short overview, things like that, I would always refer to the manual because there it is really, well explained. And but in general, it's like this. So the immersive profile or the immersive mode focuses on the directional information so that, of course, we can localize everything in a proper way, but still it keeps somehow the character of the headphones, so the natural sound character of the headphones without, changing too much there. And this, for me, for example, is a very good compromise that you don't get too much coloration and still somehow imaging or the localization and externalization is on a very good level. And neutral is more optimized for stereo monitoring so that you are just, simulating a stereo setup that is no longer here, but here in front of you. And it's also just keeping the character of the headphones, which I think is even more important because if it's stereo, we are very used to the regular, character of our headphones. And raw, this is for the, if you want to get really deep into it, this gives you access to the complete data set of Aural ID. So including, all the information that also define usually then things that are part of the common factor. So about this, generalized target curve for the headphones. And therefore, usually, for example, for me, it sounds really strange if I just activate it. You will need to equalize the headphones separately. So, but if you're into that, usually you are already, I don't know, some kind of a researcher, and then I think you know what you will have to do. Otherwise, of course, just reach out to us. But usually HRTFs have just, different layers, and each layer has, a different function, of course, and also has a consequence of, for example, what's happening. And if a very precise, for example, headphones EQ is set, then you only can use it with this headphone. You only can use it if it was really optimized for this model. And if you want to get a good impression of just, giving the positions and everything, it might be better to compromise slightly, but have the better tonality then. This is the reason for it. Yeah. What's very, very interesting, and I think also worth spending some time with, every single virtual monitor, so everything you see here on the grid, can be tweaked. So you can completely change its position. So you can just, for example, if you are lucky enough to have a real 714 or, I don't know, 5.1 speaker setup, you can really compare. You can listen to stuff on the speakers and then, turn on your headphones and then just try to find out, is this the same position? Or would it make sense, for example, to go 20 degrees more to the right side? And this is always possible if you just click on the speaker icons, and then you have azimuth, elevation, and of course gain. So you can of course also then fine tune the gain. Can also sometimes make perfect sense. A nice thing in the beginning, I usually just solo speakers to just solo virtual speakers to just get an impression. Where are they? Where can I really localize them? And this is easy with a shortcut. You can, as you see, you can have here on the right side there is solo, but you can also just click on control on the Mac and then click on the speakers. So hold control, click on the speakers, and then this is doable. And it's huge fun, to be honest, to analyze, for example, mixes, because usually it's not possible that you can just turn the ceiling speakers to solo mode, stuff like that. You will also then find out, unfortunately, I have to say, that some codecs that are used, for example, by Apple Music and of course also by Dolby, they of course produce artifacts. And there's a nice thing if you listen to a good MP3 track, for example, I don't know, 256 kilobits. For me, it's almost impossible, I have to say, with pop music to hear the difference. If you listen to the side signal only, this is this wonderful, also nice button we have on 9320, which is called diff. So this gives you the side signal only. You hear all of these artifacts because, of course, MP3 was programmed that it uses masking. So signals for example, from the mid signal range, they mask stuff on the sides, and then it's fine. And then, of course, they can just compress them, and this becomes audible. And it's the same is happening here. For example, if you listen to usually the easiest way is to listen to the ceiling speakers, and then you will hear things like that. And then you will appreciate, for example, that there are ADMs. This is the uncompressed format, usually from studios. And you will appreciate that some people, for example, are working on a streaming service for immersive audio without, compression. So this is something MSM Studios are working on, who also did, the pure audio Blu-ray, and they are now working on something like a pure audio streaming service. It's pretty interesting. Yeah, this is something that is very important, an equalizer, because you will realize that even if you know your headphones and the HRTF is well made, usually it helps a lot to just tweak it slightly, and just use this EQ for that. Just set it to active, and then you can just use these fully parametric filters to just get closer to the tonality you are looking for. And below this equalizer setting, we have the low frequency envelopment section, which I already mentioned in the beginning. So what is this? This is really not that easy to explain, and you will also have to listen to it with material that is somehow a good match to that. Because I already told you, it's not something you will hear differences with monophonic bass. So if you just go for some EDM stuff, probably there will not be a difference at all. It's more about, if signals in the low end are different from each other, or if there are phase differences. And with the right material and the right settings, this can just make your envelopment way better, so that you really are, for example, part of this church where an organ was playing and where, I don't know, a choir was singing. Because this is something microphones, of course, easily can pick up. And someone like Morten is then perfectly matching these microphones to, the immersive channels. And then it's absolutely possible to experience these differences, because there are then phase differences, and this makes it no longer monophonic. And the only two sliders you see, one is just selecting the frequency, and below this frequency, somehow this enhancement or this processing takes place. And the other one is just called compensation. And this is a really nice word. I also had to check that out. It can be used to reduce the low frequency level at the contralateral ear. So contralateral is just, a nice description of this is my one ear and this is the contralateral ear. So it's just on the opposite side, and makes sure that you can just, play around with that. I would not go to absolutely to extremes, because now I'm blurred. I would not go to extremes because, as you know, especially with low frequencies, it's almost impossible that only one ear, catches a frequency. For example, at, I don't know, 100 hertz. With 3 meters wavelength, of course, the other one also gets something. Yeah. But this is, I think, for if you are really into these subtle, changes in the low frequency spectrum of material that is not monophonic, please make use of this. I already have shown you this nice head tracker, and it's just you click just on this arrow in the middle of Aural ID. This is just here, and then this section opens, and you only have to enable head tracking, and that's it. And you can, of course, also, this is makes perfect sense, if you have your 0 position, so which should become your 0 position, look there, hold still, and then click on set to 0. And then this is somehow calibrated for you. And it's interesting, I think, for example, VR uses this in a very creative and, somehow really interesting context with games. And then, of course, you make huge movements with your head. This is actually not really made for that. This is more that you might find out in reality. For example, we use small movements of our head to just double check where something is coming from. So, for example, if we are not really sure if this is from above, we usually do something like this for a short period. And this is how it helps us to understand what's happening around us. And head tracking can also be huge help here. And I know of other people who just don't use it. So they just, they just move their head while they are listening to music. And of course, then it's counterproductive. Yeah? Speaking about music, by accident, I have just Snarky Puppy here with Empire Central. I can already tell you there's a fantastic album which will come out in at the end of the year. Because I had the pleasure to join one of their sessions. They usually, this is cool, they record their albums live, and the complete audience gets headphones. It was not binauralized, it was standard headphones, and you are just sitting in the middle of the musicians while they are playing. And of course, there's no PA, and then they have really clean microphone signals. And it was just amazing, together with an orchestra in Utrecht. And there will be a new album called, am I allowed to say that? Everyone who was there knows it's Somni. So it's about, sleep and the world of sleep. And it's fantastic. This was the advertisement block. But this is just such a fantastic music. You have to check that out. You can, of course, also load your favorite music to Apple Music. And I would like to show you how to use Aural ID to then listen to, for example, an Atmos mix with your headphones. It's very small here in Apple Music section. If an album is available in Atmos, it's just always also shown there. And you will realize more and more albums are already released. And there are fantastic things out there, to be honest. There are also not that ideal things out there, especially from the beginning, where nobody knew how to do it and people had not been sure how to mix because let's face it, most people listen to it on headphones. So it has to work binauralized. It's fantastic to do it on speakers only, but if you don't do this double check, then you get issues. And the only thing you have to do is you open the preferences of Apple Music, go to playback, and then under spatial audio, this is how Apple calls immersive audio, there is Dolby Atmos, and you should set this actually to automatic. I can tell you why. There are different settings. So there's automatic, always on and off. And always on was something I also tried out because I thought makes sense because I want to use it. But always on gives you a binauralized stereo mix from Apple Music. So with their own binauralized version. And then you only get a stereo thing into Aural ID, and this sounds very strange because you can imagine that then an already binauralized thing is binauralized again. So you will have to choose automatic. And this means the moment, for example, you have switched your computer to the Aural ID bridge as the output device, it will then send out the Atmos version. And I always, of course, check it. You can hear it, of course, but just open, the channel input settings, and then you can see what comes in. And then it should be, for example, 12 channels if you listen to this recording here by Snarky Puppy, or other recordings by Snarky Puppy. Because everything is Mac, and I was a PC child myself, I think, until 22, yeah, so a very long time. At the moment, you cannot use the Aural ID application, but you can use our Aural ID HRTF, so the personal one, because we offer you a so-called SOFA file. And you will then need, of course, a binaural renderer. And there is actually one that I think is very worth checking out. This is Virtuoso by Applied Psychoacoustics Lab from Jungkook Lee, originally, and his team. And this thing offers you a nice option. As you can see, it's a little small, sorry, SOFA. And you can then just switch from, at the moment it's set to built in, so they deliver some standard HRTFs, and you can just switch to SOFA, and then you can load your Aural ID SOFA file here. And then have fun with it. And SOFA stands for Spatially Oriented Format for Acoustics. Also something I usually don't have on my mind. Just if you're interested in it. It's used in a lot of also research tools, and of course a lot of third-party software. So getting your Aural ID SOFA file, I think, for example, if you are in that field of work, can make perfect sense. I think I might mention that Jungkook is also using our Aural ID version as his, to-go-to thing in Virtuoso. And just as you know about it, you will get a collection of SOFA files for different sample rates. So it's usually 44.1, 48.96. And then you see there is DTF also mentioned there. And I would really try to use DTF as well. For me, it works better, especially, for example, in Virtuoso. DTF means just that it also only uses, or it focuses on the localization part. And for me, just the tonality is better, so it's less colored if I'm using this version. So check this out. So yeah, and once again, to come back, to the PRM solution, this is how it looks like. So if you're interested into that, you will get a 9320, you will get a pair of headphones, calibration mic, USB-C cable, 2 different, connector cables for the headphones, and then also 2 additional sets for the ear cups and the headband. This is what you will get out of it. I'm just thinking about one thing. Sorry. Because I mentioned it that we use a factory calibration for the headphones. You can use them in your 9320, and it's just happening by, selecting the type of, for example, ear cup, first of all, leather or velvet, and then just by entering the serial. And that's it. It's just an hour. Fantastic. But where comes this whistle from my smartphone? Yeah. So first of all, thank you for listening. If you have questions, I think you already know that. It's support@genelec.com. Really nice team of colleagues are just waiting for your questions, including the one sitting here. And I would say then it's time for some questions, if we have any. I'll just go back. So, questions. Yeah, perfect. Now I have the questions. Just a second. Interesting masterclass. Thank you. Is it possible to listen to an ambisonics microphone with B format input? Arthur, I think this would also mean that we need a different somehow setup for the virtual speakers, correct? So this is something this should be discussed. To be honest, I don't know right now. We of course have ambisonics absolutely on our minds because the researchers always ask for it. But usually, you know, this is like this. So if you would have to encode, for example, the microphone, this will output you different channels, and then only you will have to find the matching channel format to play back. And this should then be, I would say, a regular ambisonics format. But please, you know, feel free to just, you know, send us an email. There's another one from you. Yeah. Is it possible to have separate virtual output for lower frequency reproduction? Yes. You remember when I have shown when you click on the speakers, you can change the gain, and you can, for example, easily just click on the sub and change the gain as well. So this is very easy. And this is, for example, also something that is very interesting, that Atmos music mixes, Dolby Atmos music mixes, in a lot of cases, they don't make use of the LFE that heavily. It's just there, yeah. And it's just because exactly what you mentioned, that binauralized, it can give you just some kind of problems sometimes, that it's just getting too dull and there's no clarity anymore. And this is also a problem because from the cinema point of view, LFE was a discrete channel. So for example, I don't know, dinosaurs walking around, and then the footsteps are only on the LFE channel, the low end of the footsteps. But if you have, for example, a bass drum and an electric bass playing, and someone has this on the main channels, so for left and right, and he puts some amount of it also on the LFE, you know, this just is not cool anymore, yeah, because it's just overlapping. Because there is no bass management thing, it's really overlapping then in the complete range. So therefore, exactly, you can just, you know, reduce that, and then you don't have any issues with what could have been done wrong in the mix. Yeah, latency of Aural ID depends on the buffer size. You might have seen it. I have to admit, at the moment, I don't know. Out of, let me see. It's probably, it really depends on the frequency. Sorry, on the sampling rate, and then on the buffer size. But I will send you an email, I promise. Because there's, yeah, Jungkook is, I absolutely agree. Jungkook is pretty okay in the immersive world. No, it's fascinating. Also, this new project they now had, you know, with just checking out different ways of recording an orchestra and then comparing it, and it's all available for free. So you can just, you know, download these stems, you can play around with it, you can get your own impression. If you ever have the chance, you know, to see one of his lectures, and just go there or visit, you know, visit him in England. This is fantastic guy. Absolutely. Yeah, also nice thing, try listening to music with head tracking while cycling through Amsterdam. Why not? Man, your brain will compensate for it. Exactly. This is how long does it take between, you know, sending the measurements and getting the SOFA files back? Ideally 2 working days, but let's say 1 week. If it's really urgent, you know, let me know, please. Then I can just make sure. This is still a small team doing it. And I know who they are. So this is not a problem to then speed this up slightly. Cool. I think this had been the questions. Fantastic. Thanks for participating. And as said, you know, just please feel free to just write an email. This works always best. And Arthur, I will just, you know, make sure that I can just check the latencies for you, and I will send it to you. This is easier than that I just, you know, think about it now. Actually, I don't think about it that often because the latency is not really of interest for me, the way I'm using it. For example, it's different when I would record something, but of course you're right. It's also then the latency with head tracking and stuff like that. That can of course affect it. Yeah. Fantastic. Then once again, thanks a lot for being with us. We have another webinar soon about GLM 5.2. Probably we'll see each other again. And otherwise, I just wish you a nice evening, a nice afternoon, wherever you are. Thank you so much.